In May 1976, while visiting her sister in California, a 25-year-old stepped out for a quiet evening walk and never returned. A breakthrough in forensic genealogy revealed the identity of her perpetrator and brought answers to a mystery of nearly 50 years. Karen Percefield was born on October 12, 1950. She was a native of Oregon, Ohio. Her parents, Mildred Parrish and Bruce H. Percefield, raised her in a modest, loving home. Grew up alongside her three sisters, Kimberly, Lynn, and Anne. At 25 years old, Karen had gone to visit one of her sisters in California, but this visit would be her last. Karen had no idea that her decision to travel that day would lead to devastating consequences. On May 20, 1976, while visiting her sister, Karen stepped out for a walk in the evening and never returned. As hours turned into days, concern grew and the search for intensified. 8 days later, on May 28th, deputies in Santa Cruz County were dispatched to a scene near Aptos Village Park in response to reports of a suspicious demise. There, lying in the brush, was the body of a young woman. The body was soon identified as that of Karen Percefield. The confirmation of her identity brought an unbearable weight to her grieving family, shattering any remaining hope that she might be found alive. The cause of demise pointed immediately to foul play, and the case was swiftly ruled a slaying. The investigators worked tirelessly in the days following the discovery, combing through evidence and interviewing anyone who might offer a lead. But despite their efforts, the case grew cold. More than 40 years after the crime, in 2019, the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's investigators made the decision to revisit the cold case. Advances in forensic technology offered new hope, and several pieces of evidence collected from the original investigation were submitted to the California Department of Justice Bureau of Forensic Services. From this effort, a male DNA profile was successfully developed. However, the momentum was short-lived. When the profile was run through existing criminal DNA databases, there was no match. The individual was not in the system, and once again, investigators found themselves without a name, only a genetic fingerprint without a known source. Determined not to let the case grow cold again, the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office took another step forward. In the fall of 2023, they submitted the forensic evidence to Othram. Using forensic-grade genome sequencing and genetic genealogy methods, Othram was able to build a comprehensive DNA profile from the evidence. This allowed investigators to trace the suspect's family lineage and narrow down possible matches. The new approach, combining science with genealogical research, led to a long-awaited breakthrough. In early April 2025, the investigators were able to name Richard Somerhalder as the individual responsible for ending the life of Karen. Back in 1976, during the initial stages of the investigation, Somerhalder had already caught the attention of authorities. He was considered a person of interest, but at the time, there simply was not enough evidence to move forward with charges. Just a few months after Karen's case was opened, in September 1976, Somerhalder was arrested in connection with two other cases in Santa Cruz County: 31-year-old Vicky Bazori and 21-year-old Mary Gorman. The charges solidified suspicions about his violent tendencies. He was convicted and served 8.5 years in prison before being released on parole. After his release, Somerhalder left California, disappearing from the area where his crimes had left a lasting mark. The detectives turned their attention back to Somerhalder. They began the process of collecting a reference DNA sample to confirm the match to the profile developed from the crime scene evidence. However, their investigation hit a final, immovable obstacle. Somerhalder had passed away in 1994, though his demise meant he would never face trial. The identification still carried significant weight. Sheriff's officials reflected on the case as an example of enduring commitment. The sheriff stated, "No matter how much time has passed, we will never stop seeking the truth." Karen's sister, Annie Goheen, said that her nickname was Cookie. She said was as sweet as she was beautiful. No matter what, and this is a hard pill to swallow, no matter what you have to forgive, because if you do not, you will carry that hate and that resentment. And I felt that for so long because I was angry and mad. Karen's daughter, Meadow Shoemake, was 6 years old when her mother's life was taken. She said, yeah, it has been a lifelong, obsession of mine to want to know what happened, why and all that, and who. Like I said, your mind wanders to far out places when you do not know the truth. So it is like a bittersweet justice. I am really happy that there must be other people, that are going to feel the same way as me. In August 2018, a woman's lifeless body was discovered in Spain. It would take years for a breakthrough fingerprint match to identify the woman. On August 4, 2018, a woman's body was discovered hanging in a poultry shed attached to a farmhouse in Sant Julia de Ramis, a small town in Torona, Spain. The discovery shocked the local community as the body appeared to have been there for some time. The woman, whose appearance seemed out of place in the isolated location, had no identification documents on her, and local residents did not recognize her. Upon closer inspection, the investigators found a tattoo on the woman's left forearm that read, "Success" in Hebrew. This detail stood out as it was a unique and personal mark, potentially offering a significant lead. However, despite efforts to trace the tattoo's meaning or connection, the investigation turned up no immediate connections to anyone in the area or beyond. The autopsy revealed that the cause of demise was hanging, and based on the evidence, the demise was initially ruled that she ended her own life. There were no signs of foul play or external injuries, which led investigators to believe that it was self-inflicted. Despite the conclusion, the circumstances surrounding the discovery remained suspicious. The local police, alongside forensic experts, attempted to piece together any possible clues that might reveal the woman's identity. They looked into missing persons cases across Spain, hoping to find a match, but nothing seemed to connect the dots. Despite efforts to circulate her image and gather information from the public, no one came forward with information that could help solve the case. The investigation was slow, compounded by language barriers and international complications, and unfortunately the case went cold. In October 2024, 6 years later, Interpol launched the Identify Me campaign, an international initiative designed to solve the mystery surrounding the identities of 46 women found deceased under unexplained circumstances across Europe. Among the cases submitted for review was 33-year-old Ainhoa Izaga Ibieta Lemus, whose disappearance had remained unresolved for years. Ainhoa was born in 1980. She was a Paraguayan woman who moved to Spain in 2013, seeking a new start and possibly a more peaceful life far from the familiarity of her home country. Regular communication with her family helped to reassure them that she was safe and settling into her new life in Spain. However, this routine came to a halt in mid-2018 when her family noticed the sudden and unexplained break in contact. They grew increasingly concerned, trying to reach out through multiple channels, but their efforts were met with silence. As weeks passed without any word from Ainhoa, her family's worries deepened. Her brother, unable to uncover any explanation or trace of her whereabouts, took the brave step of reporting her disappearance to the Paraguayan authorities in late 2018. The missing persons report prompted authorities to investigate Ainhoa's sudden disappearance, but the case was met with challenges from the start. Given the fact that she had moved to Spain years prior, the international scope of the situation made it harder to track down any leads. Spanish authorities, recognizing the significance of Ainhoa's case, submitted her details as part of the initiative, hoping the Identify Me campaign would offer new leads and the potential for identification. In March 2025, a breakthrough came when a fingerprint match was found in Paraguay's national database. Paraguayan authorities, while revisiting Ainhoa's case, managed to match the fingerprints from the body discovered in Sant Julia de Ramis with those in their national database. The discovery marked the first successful transcontinental identification under the Identify Me program. While the mystery of her identity was solved, questions about how Ainhoa ended up in such an isolated location and whether she truly ended her own life continue to haunt both her family and investigators. In November 2019, in the quiet city of Paris, California, a 22-year-old man was found fatally shot. Despite swift response by law enforcement and an active investigation, no arrests were made, and the case eventually went cold until a major breakthrough came. Santiago Diaz was born in 1977. He was a resident of Paris, California. Tragically, Santiago's life did not follow the path he might have imagined. Whatever hope he had for the future was ultimately cut short. The tragic incident unfolded in November 2019. On that day, Riverside County Sheriff's deputies were dispatched to the 700 block of East 7th Street following reports of a shooting. What began as a routine call for service quickly escalated into a scene of chaos and irreversible loss. When the authorities arrived at the location, they discovered 3 individuals suffering from gunshot wounds. Emergency responders moved swiftly to assess the victims and provide aid. 2 of the individuals were quickly transported to a nearby hospital. Fortunately, their injuries were determined to be non-life-threatening. Santiago Diaz, however, did not survive the attack. Despite emergency efforts at the scene, he was pronounced deceased. His life, which until then had been largely unknown to the public, suddenly became the focus of attention in the wake of this senseless violence. The demise of a 22-year-old under such circumstances sent ripples through the community. The Riverside Sheriff's Central Unit was assigned to lead the investigation. Detectives combed through evidence, conducted interviews, and followed multiple leads in their pursuit of answers. The nature of the attack, along with the presence of multiple victims, underscored the seriousness of the case and the urgency to find those responsible. However, despite extensive investigative efforts, no significant breakthroughs occurred. Over time, leads began to dwindle and the momentum behind the investigation slowed. The case, once a top priority, gradually slipped into the category of unsolved crimes, leaving those who knew Santiago with little closure. No arrests were ever made in connection with the shooting. The case went cold, and with it, any immediate hope for accountability faded into uncertainty. However, in late 2024, 5 years after the case was opened, a significant development breathed new life into the long-dormant case. The detectives with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department revisited Santiago Diaz's unsolved case after uncovering new evidence. The nature of this evidence has not been publicly disclosed, but it was enough to prompt the authorities to officially reopen the investigation. With renewed focus, investigators began piecing together the timeline and re-examining past statements and forensic details. This fresh look at the case brought clarity that had previously been missing. After thorough analysis, the detectives identified Jeremy Whittle, a 26-year-old resident of Paris, as one of the individuals suspected to be involved in the 2019 shooting. On March 27, 2025, Whittle was taken into custody by the authorities. His arrest marked the first major breakthrough in the case, after more than 5 years of uncertainty. Following his arrest, Whittle was booked into the Robert Presley Detention Center. At this time, no additional details have been released regarding his alleged role in the shooting, nor has it been confirmed whether other suspects are being pursued. Still, the arrest represented a critical turning point in an investigation that had once appeared to be at a standstill. The case remains active and ongoing. Investigators continue to search for more answers, aiming to piece together the full story of what happened on that November day in 2019. Anyone with information about this investigation is urged to contact Riverside County Sheriff's Department, Master Investigator S. Denham or Master Investigator V. Magana of the Central Unit at 951-955-2772. When people think of notorious street gangs, names like the Bloods or the Crips often come up. But one gang stands out for its sheer brutality and global reach. Born on the streets of Los Angeles, California, and fueled by civil war, MS-13 quickly evolved into a ruthless criminal empire. Known for their savage tactics, wielding machetes, carrying out ritualistic slayings, and enforcing loyalty through fear, this gang does not just dominate neighborhoods, it decimates them. From extortion and illegal substance trafficking to human smuggling and public executions, their crimes span continents. This is not just a gang, it is a transnational menace. Mara Salvatrucha, commonly known as MS-13, is an international criminal gang that originated in Los Angeles, California during the 1980s. It was established by Salvadoran immigrants who had fled the brutal civil wars in Central America. These immigrants settled primarily in the neighborhoods of Pico, Union, Westlake, and Rampart. Despite escaping violent conflict in their homeland, Salvadorans arriving in the United States throughout the 1970s and 1980s were largely refused asylum and instead classified as undocumented immigrants. This legal status forced many to enter the country without documentation, leading them to concentrate in urban centers with large undocumented populations like Los Angeles. Initially, MS-13 was not a criminal enterprise, but rather a loose group of young Salvadoran immigrants who shared a love for heavy metal music. However, living in a city rife with gang activity and racial hostility, especially toward undocumented immigrants, placed the Salvadoran community in a vulnerable position. Out of a need for protection against established gangs, composed mostly of Mexicans, Asians, and African Americans, MS-13 began to evolve. Over time, it transformed into a gang with a mission to defend its own members. Some early members incorporated elements of Satanism into the group, and while that influence has waned, traces of it remain in the gang's symbols. The gang's transformation into a more structured and dangerous criminal organization was accelerated. Under the leadership of Ernesto de Ros. As a former member of Salvadoran Special Forces, de Ros had received training in Panama from the United States Green Berets. When he took control of an MS-13 clique in 1990, he applied military discipline and strategic planning to the gang's activities, leading to a rise in power and influence. Around this period, MS-13 developed a rivalry with the 18th Street Gang. Although the two groups were initially allies, particularly as both were open to Salvadoran recruits, their alliance ended violently after a fatal dispute in 1989, reportedly sparked by a conflict over a girl. The event triggered ongoing retaliation between the two gangs, creating a cycle of violence that continues to this day. As MS-13 members were increasingly arrested in the Los Angeles area, many of them were deported to their home countries. Among them was Jose Abrego, a high-ranking figure within the gang, who was deported 4 times. These deportations inadvertently helped the gang expand its influence beyond U.S. borders. In El Salvador, where gang activity had been minimal prior to the 1990s, the deported MS-13 members began to recruit and organize. According to the Los Angeles Times, U.S. deportation policies played a significant role in the gang's growth, both domestically and abroad, as deported gangsters found a power vacuum waiting to be filled in their homeland. The Salvadoran Civil War, which lasted over a decade and ended in 1992, had left deep scars on the nation. Government forces, including U.S.-trained squads, targeted civilians and Catholic clergy, often using terror tactics. Child soldiers were conscripted and human rights abuses were widespread, largely perpetrated by the military. This period of intense violence destabilized the country, making it fertile ground for organized criminal groups like MS-13 to take root upon the return of deported members. After the war, the Chapultepec Peace Accords required the Salvadoran government to form a new civilian police force to replace the military in law enforcement roles. However, the political party in power, ARENA, which had ties to the wartime military regime, delayed this transition. In response to rising gang violence that peaked in the 1990s, El Salvador's government implemented aggressive anti-gang measures known as Manadura and Supermanadura during the ARENA presidencies. These policies, rather than dismantling gang operations, appeared to strengthen groups like MS-13, according to both observers and gang members. When the National Civil Police was finally established in 1993, it included members of the former military, some of whom were known war criminals. This weakened law enforcement, giving MS-13 an opportunity to establish a stronghold. Furthermore, the availability of leftover weapons from the war and ongoing economic difficulties allowed the gang to thrive. Today, MS-13 generates revenue through arms trafficking, extortion, and targeted assassinations. On July 13, 2003, 17-year-old Brenda Paz was found fatally stabbed near Virginia's Shenandoah River. Formerly affiliated with MS-13, she had turned informant for the FBI, providing details about the gang's criminal operations. Pregnant at the time of the crime, Brenda's life was ended by individuals she once considered friends. Just over a year later, on December 23, 2004, one of the most brutal MS-13 attacks occurred in Camelican, Honduras, when gang members opened fire on a civilian bus, taking the lives of 28 people, mostly women and children. The massacre, carried out to protest the Honduran government's plan to reinstate the demise penalty, led to several convictions, while one accused mastermind's life was ended later in prison. Also in 2004, the FBI established the MS-13 National Gang Task Force in the United States, aiming to disrupt the gang's operations through cooperation with local law enforcement and deportation efforts, an approach that inadvertently aided MS-13's international spread. In 2006, two high-profile MS-13 cases made headlines. On May 13th, Ernesto "Smokey" Miranda, a founding member who had since renounced gang life and begun studying law, was slain at his home in El Salvador. The following month in Houston, Texas, teenager Gabriel Granillo was stabbed by Ashley Page Benton during a park altercation, drawing national attention to the gang's presence. In New York, Julio Chavez allegedly ended the life of a man in 2007 after mistaking him for a Bloods member due to the red sweatshirt he wore. That same year, Connecticut's Vietnam Veterans Memorial was defaced with MS-13 graffiti and racial threats. In June 2008, Edwin Ramos, a 21-year-old MS-13 member, fatally shot Anthony Bologna and his two sons in San Francisco after a minor traffic dispute. The authorities believed that the family was wrongly identified as rival gang members. A few months later, Jonathan Ratana was convicted of taking the life of Miguel Angel Darris in Ohio in what was believed to be a gang initiation act. In 2009, Colorado and California authorities arrested 20 MS-13 members, seizing weapons, illegal substances, and cash. That year, 3 gang members shot 2 innocent civilians in Long Island, causing Edgar Villalobos' life to be ended after misidentifying them as rivals. Federal agents uncovered a chilling 2009 assassination plot against an immigration and customs enforcement officer in New York. MS-13 members, allegedly acting on orders from leaders in El Salvador, planned the hit in retaliation for numerous arrests. The plot was revealed by Walter Duque Torres, who was being held in custody. Meanwhile, in 2011 and 2012, numerous gang members were convicted of racketeering and slaying in San Francisco, including Danilo Velasquez, who was sentenced to life for mistaking victims as Nortinos members based on their red clothing. Under President Mauricio Funes of the FMLN party, an unofficial truce was negotiated between MS-13 and the 18th Street Gang in 2012. In exchange for a reduction in crime rates, the government provided incentives, including transfers to lower security prisons and rewards for surrendered firearms. While the crime rates dropped, extortion remained rampant and gang structures grew stronger. Public disapproval of government leniency and lack of transparency led to the truce's downfall when Salvador Sanchez Corén, also of FMLN, took office in 2014 and reinstated hardline tactics. The truce's collapse in 2015 resulted in a violent resurgence, with El Salvador recording the world's highest crime rate that year. Gangs, having used the truce to expand and reorganize, were even more dangerous. Subsequent investigations into the truce revealed government corruption, including accusations that negotiators encouraged gang violence to maintain leverage and talks. Some participants were later prosecuted for their roles. The U.S. has pursued MS-13 through multiple federal initiatives. Operation Community Shield and coordinated international crackdowns have led to thousands of arrests. In 2012, the U.S. Treasury classified MS-13 as a transnational criminal organization, imposing sanctions on its leaders, including the imprisoned Elmer Canales Rivera. On Long Island, MS-13's brutality persisted, with cases like the alleged 2010 execution of a 2-year-old child and his mother, and the 2015 slaying of Jonathan Cardona Hernandez by William Castellano over suspected gang affiliation. From 2016 to 2018, a series of brutal crimes tied to MS-13 members underscored the gang's ongoing threat. These included the luring end of Jordi Mejia in Maryland using a fake Facebook account, the case of Raymond Wood in Virginia, and the 2011 crime against Julio Matute by Walter Gomez in New Jersey, who later fled but was apprehended in Virginia. Further operations, such as Operation Raging Bull in 2017, saw hundreds of arrests across the U.S. and Central America. The Houston authorities arrested 2 MS-13 members for holding 3 girls hostage and subjecting them to prolonged abuse. That same year, the Center for Immigration Studies documented 506 MS-13 related criminal cases in the U.S. from 2012 to 2018. In 2018 and beyond, law enforcement continued to dismantle high-level MS-13 operations. East Coast gang leader Miguel Angel Correa Diaz was arraigned on conspiracy charges in New York, prompting retaliatory threats against police. That same year, Carla Morales escaped GPS monitoring after helping lure Jose Villanueva to his end. She was eventually captured in 2023 and accepted a 30-year sentence. In 2020, the U.S. Justice Department pursued the end-of-life penalty against Elmer Martinez for the case of 2 minors in Virginia. In 2021, terrorism charges were brought against 14 imprisoned MS-13 leaders in El Salvador. One high-profile target is Yulan Arn Arjaga Carrillas, alias Porky, the alleged MS-13 leader in Honduras. He was added to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list in 2021 with a $100,000 reward. In 2023, U.S. authorities increased the bounty to $5 million and sanctioned him under a federal executive order. Other fugitives include MS-13 members wanted by the FBI and DHS, some of whom have been captured and deported, while others remain at large. MS-13's presence in political discourse has been especially prominent in U.S. Republican narratives. Although MS-13 represents less than 1% of U.S. gang members, its violent reputation has made it a focal point in debates over immigration and sanctuary city policies. Despite claims of a surge, official data has not supported these assertions. MS-13 continues to engage in illegal enterprises, including illegal substance trafficking, extortion, and violent crimes, both in the U.S. and Central America. On April 25, 2025, 45-year-old Juan Carlos Rivas Moriera, Stocky, a high-ranking member and leader of MS-13, was sentenced to life. On April 29th, the last of 7 MS-13 gang members has been sentenced for a double slaying in 2022. 31-year-old Hector Ramirez Cuervo was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. In April 2007, in Frederick, Colorado, a frantic child's knock at a neighbor's door revealed a tragic secret that her mother is laying unresponsive in the bathroom with a fatal stab wound to her chest. The case went cold, leaving the family in a painful limbo that stretched on for nearly 18 years. Jessica Bejarano was born on January 6, 1982, and lived in the town of Frederick, Colorado. By the age of 25, she was already a wife and a mother. She shared her home with her husband, Daniel Bejarano, and together they were raising their 2 children. On April 6, 2007, a disturbing scene unfolded. Jessica's young daughter, overwhelmed and confused, went to a neighbor's house seeking help. She told the neighbor that her mummy is not waking up. Alarmed by the child's words and sensing something was terribly wrong, the neighbor rushed to the Bejarano residence to check on Jessica. Upon entering the house, the neighbor was met with a horrifying sight. Jessica's lifeless body was found in the bathroom, and the reality of the situation quickly became clear. This was not a medical emergency, but a possible crime scene. The neighbor wasted no time and immediately alerted the local authorities. The Frederick police officers quickly responded to the distress call at the 7,900 block of Larkspur Circle. Inside the home, the police confirmed the tragic discovery. Jessica was deceased. She had sustained a single stab wound to the chest, which was the cause of demise. The discovery was made even more devastating by the presence of her 4-year-old daughter and 2-year-old son, who were in the home at the time of the incident. Their safety was secured, but the trauma of what had occurred would not easily fade. An official investigation was promptly launched to determine what had happened to Jessica. The investigators began piecing together a timeline and exploring possible motives. Attention naturally turned to those closest to her, including her husband, Daniel. However, through verification of his whereabouts and work records, the authorities were able to confirm that Daniel had been at work during the time of the crime. He was ultimately cleared of suspicion. As time went on, the investigation began to lose momentum. With no suspects, no confessions, and no new evidence coming to light, the case slowly turned cold. After nearly 18 years of silence and uncertainty, A breakthrough finally came in March 2025. The investigators, continuing to work the cold case, obtained DNA evidence that pointed to a potential suspect. The DNA sample was matched to Daryl Birkeland, who had once worked as the maintenance man in the apartment complex where Jessica lived. With the new evidence in hand, the investigators moved swiftly. On March 14th, they conducted a follow-up interview with Birkeland, who was then living in York, Nebraska. Birkeland had been 54 at the time of the crime. Following the interview, Birkeland was taken into custody and arrested. He was booked at the York County Sheriff's Detention Center, marking the first arrest ever made in connection to Jessica's case. In custody, Birkeland confessed. He admitted that he had known Jessica's husband was not at home when he went to her residence. According to his statement, an argument between him and Jessica escalated, ultimately leading to the fatal stabbing. His confession shed light on the events of that tragic day. After the attack, Birkeland fled the scene. He left Colorado and made his way to Nebraska, disposing of the crime weapon along the way. For years, he lived without suspicion, carrying the weight of his crime in silence. In a final gesture, Birkeland wrote a letter addressed to Jessica's children. In it, he expressed remorse for his actions and the pain he had caused. While no words could undo the damage or restore what had been lost, the letter served as an acknowledgement of guilt and a reflection of regret. Birkeland was formally charged with a single count in the second degree. The charge came after his confession and the DNA evidence that linked him directly to the crime. He is set to be extradited to Colorado. Cece Marrow, Jessica's mother, said that she is grateful for the work that led to this arrest. Saying that the family never gave up hope, she said, "There were so many twists and turns in her case, but we always had faith in the CBI." In April 1983, a 23-year-old woman left a Carpentersville, Illinois bar and was never seen again. A breakthrough in this case would only come more than 4 decades later. Karen Sheepers was born and raised in Sycamore, Illinois, where she attended Sycamore High School. At 23 years old, she was employed as a computer programmer at First Chicago Bank Card. She lived alone in her own apartment. She was going through personal challenges, including the recent end of her engagement and a strained relationship with some of her family members, notably her father and stepmother. On April 16, 1983, Karen suddenly vanished. That evening, she had gone out with approximately 20 coworkers to a bar called PM Bentley's, located in Carpentersville. Witnesses confirmed that she was seen inside the bar, but left on her own around 1 a.m. local time. Earlier that month, Karen had ended her engagement with her fiancé. However, there were no immediate signs that she was in any kind of danger. Following her disappearance, the authorities and her loved ones began searching for clues, but no activity was detected on her bank accounts or credit cards after that night. This raised concerns that she had not left voluntarily or planned to be gone for long. Karen's car, a yellow 1980 Toyota Celica with the license plate XP 8919, was also missing. Despite initial efforts from law enforcement and her family, no physical evidence or substantial leads emerged. The investigators canvassed areas near the bar and surrounding locations, but were unable to locate her car or determine her whereabouts. Friends and relatives distributed flyers and appealed to the public, hoping someone might have seen something unusual that night. However, these efforts yielded no concrete information and the case went cold. After some years went by, it was discovered that on the night of her disappearance, had invited her former fiancé to join her and her co-workers at the bar. He declined the invitation and in the course of the investigation, he underwent and passed a lie detector test. Further into the inquiry, it emerged that Karen had lived in an apartment that was previously rented by Thomas Ehrlicher. Ehrlicher had once been suspected in a separate missing person case, the 1976 disappearance of Barbara Gluckert. Despite this connection, Ehrlicher, who passed away in 2004, was never officially named as a suspect in Karen's case. The case then again went cold. In March 2025, 42 years after the crime took place, renewed efforts were made to bring the decades-old case back into public awareness. The Elgin Police Department's cold case unit launched a podcast titled Somebody Knows Something. The podcast aimed to generate fresh leads while offering the public deeper insight into unsolved cases like Karen Shepard's. It also explored several theories about what might have happened to her, including the possibility that she had driven off the road and into a body of water. One of the podcast's focal points was the idea that her car, and possibly her remains, could still be submerged somewhere nearby. Acting on this theory, the police collaborated with Chaos Divers, an Illinois-based search and recovery group. Using sonar technology, they investigated several potential locations where a submerged vehicle might be found. Their work focused on bodies of water in and around Elgin, Illinois, where Karen had last been seen. On March 25th, a major breakthrough finally occurred. The authorities located a yellow 1980 Toyota Celica submerged in the Fox River in Elgin, matching the description and license plate of Karen's missing vehicle. Inside the vehicle, the investigators discovered skeletal remains and sent it for analysis. The detectives said that they were even able to uncover some of Karen's items. Among the items was a birthstone ring that she wore and the metal part of her 1977 class of Sycamore High School tassel. Detective Andrew Houghton said, "I think it was a pretty emotional moment for everyone. I mean, being able to give some of those items back to her mother, who is 90 years old, was just really great. It was a nice way to kind of bring everything full circle." While her relatives welcome any new updates on the case, Karen's brother, Gary Shepard, said that the effort may be a couple of years too late. He said, "God bless them for that. I wish they had looked this hard in 1983, but they did not. Their line was, she had a fight with her boyfriend and she just left. She just took off. You know, she will probably be back." Gary said that he remembers their father searching for her by plane after she went missing. But he does not remember the investigators doing as much as they are today to find his sister. As for what happened to Karen, the detectives said that they are still looking into it. On January 19, 1970, a mother rushed her 16-month-old son to a hospital in Sulphur, Louisiana, claiming that he had fallen from his crib. It was not until more than 50 years later, with the resurfacing of long-forgotten letters, that the case was reopened. Alice Rollinson Bunchidelight was born in 1950 in Bridge City, Louisiana. She graduated from West Jefferson High School in 1968. After high school, Alice pursued her studies in nursing at Southwest Mississippi Community College in Summit, Mississippi, aiming to build a future in the healthcare field. At 18, Alice married Earl Bunch Jr., who was serving in the U.S. Army. Their marriage, full of promise, soon faced a harsh reality when Earl was deployed to Thailand during the Vietnam War. Their time apart was difficult for Alice, but she remained strong and supported her husband from afar. In September of 1968, Alice gave birth to her son, Earl D. Bunch III, just a few months after Earl's deployment. Raising a child alone while her husband was halfway across the world proved to be a daunting task, only maintaining communication with Earl through letters. On January 19, 1970, Alice brought her 16-month-old son to a hospital in Sulphur, claiming that he had fallen from his crib. However, medical examinations revealed a far more disturbing reality. The doctors discovered multiple injuries on Earl's small body, including skull fractures, bruises, bite marks, and even a burn on his buttocks. These injuries suggested a pattern of abuse far beyond an accidental fall. The severity and nature of his wounds raised immediate concern, and the local authorities began an investigation into the cause of Earl's injuries and whether they were the result of deliberate harm. However, before the investigation could make significant headway, Earl tragically lost his life. In the aftermath of Earl's passing, Alice's husband, Earl Bunch Jr., returned to the United States for his son's funeral. Upon his return, Alice allegedly told him a different story about their son's injuries. She claimed that Earl probably fractured his skull when he fell out of bed at his grandmother's house in New Orleans a few weeks prior to his end. This new version of events seemed to offer an explanation, but it raised more questions than answers. How could such a serious injury go unnoticed for weeks? And why had Alice not mentioned this incident earlier? Despite the suspicions and Alice's conflicting explanations, the case soon went cold. Earl and Alice divorced in 1983 after years of separation and unresolved tension. During the legal proceedings, Alice sought full custody of their 7-year-old daughter, prompting renewed conflict between the former spouses. It was during this time that Alice began asking Earl pointed questions about the letters she had sent him during his military deployment in the late 1960s. Her sudden curiosity over the long-forgotten correspondence struck Earl as unusual and unsettling, sparking a wave of suspicion that would soon lead him to reopen painful memories he had tried to leave behind. Prompted by her questions, Earl retrieved the letters and began to read them for the first time in 13 years. What he found disturbed him. The tone, language, and content of Alice's words, especially concerning their infant son, seemed far more troubling when viewed in hindsight. What once may have appeared as expressions of frustration, now read like veiled warnings. Haunted by the loss of his son and driven by concern for the safety of his daughter, felt a growing urgency to revisit the circumstances surrounding Earl III's demise. Determined to uncover the truth, Earl began his own quiet investigation. He located and contacted the doctor who had treated his son shortly before his demise. Their conversation would leave a lasting impact. When Earl asked about the plausibility of Alice's explanation, that Earl had fallen from a bed or crib, the doctor dismissed it immediately. The physician was clear and unwavering in his assessment. The doctor told Earl those were not the type of injuries I would have expected to see from a fall from a crib, for example, or a porch or something like that where you get a fairly severe injury. The doctor elaborated further, describing the damage as more in line with abuse. It looked more like a child that had been beaten, that perhaps somebody had taken it by the feet and swung it against a piece of furniture or the wall. The doctor's words shook Earl to his core. For over a decade, he had lived under the cloud of not knowing exactly how his son had lost his life. And now he was faced with the brutal possibility that Earl's life had been ended. The renewed perspective gave Earl the strength to seek justice, not just for the son he had lost, but to ensure the safety of the daughter he still had. Earl then amended his petition for separation to seek sole custody of his daughter, but multiple mental health professionals deemed Alice and her daughter to be in good physical and mental health. Alice also testified under oath that she did not remember writing any of the letters to her husband. Joint custody was awarded to Alice and Earl, and no arrests were made in connection with Earl's fatality for decades. In 2022, more than 5 decades after the tragic demise of Earl, the detectives in Louisiana reopened the case at the request of the family. Advances in forensic science, combined with renewed determination from Earl Bunch Jr. and his surviving family, breathed new life into the investigation. As the detectives combed through the historical evidence, they uncovered the resurfaced letters exchanged between Alice Idlet and her then-husband Earl during his military service in the Vietnam War. These letters, which had long been stored away, became central to the investigation. Within their pages, Alice had confessed to disturbing thoughts, openly expressing hatred toward her infant son and a desire to end his life. One of the letters read, "What is wrong with me, darling? I should love my own son, but I really do not think I do, and if I did I would know it. I feel as if he would pass away tomorrow I would not care. Cannot help it. To me, he is the one who ruined my life." She wrote in November 1969, "I just got through whipping that little bastard. I hate him. That is the honest truth. I cannot stand this life. God had to punish me by letting me have that little brat. I wish I would have lost my life when he was born. I hate myself. Now I know how those people feel that get rid of their kids. I believe I could do it. I am serious." That same month, Alice also apparently wrote a letter stating that she never wanted to be a mother. She wrote, "I honestly wish he had never been born. He knows he will not get his way around me. I will end his life before he becomes spoiled. I honestly mean that." 2 days later, in another letter, Alice threatened to whip the victim until his darn seat is red. The letter stated, "I cannot put up with this mess. I hate your son. I wish he was deceased." What once may have been dismissed or ignored as emotional outbursts now stood as damning admissions. The tone and content of the correspondence painted a deeply troubling picture of the months leading up to Earl's demise. Earl further testified that he received similar alarming letters from Alice in March and April of 1969. He attempted to take emergency leave from service to return home, but the request was denied. Driven by this new evidence, the authorities took the extraordinary step of exhuming the child's remains to conduct a modern forensic autopsy. The results were conclusive. Earl had not passed away from an accidental fall, as previously claimed, but his life was taken. On March 28, 2025, Alice Idlet was arrested in connection with her son's demise. After decades of evading accountability, she faced the consequences of what investigators believed was a deliberate and violent act against her own child. Following her arrest, Idlet was formally indicted by a grand jury on second-degree charges. Idlet is currently being held at the Calcasieu Parish Correctional Center on a $950,000 bond. In June 2007, a concerned father looked through the bedroom window of his daughter's apartment in Minot, North Dakota, only to discover a nightmare. Knudsen was born on September 22, 1988, in Orange County, California. When she was just 5 months old, she was adopted by Gordon and Sharon Knudsen, who would go on to raise her as their own. The Knudsen family lived in Anaheim, California, where Anita spent her early years. During her freshman year of high school, the family relocated to Butte. She later graduated from Velva High School in 2006. Following graduation, enrolled at Minot State University, where she pursued a major in elementary education. Her passion for teaching was evident in her academic choice, and she worked hard to balance her studies with part-time jobs. Anita was employed at Vanity, a retail store located in the Dakota Square Mall, and also worked at a local hotel to support herself in between classes. Anita shared her apartment with a roommate named Nicole Rice. Although the two lived in close quarters, their relationship was not always smooth. Over the weekend leading up to June 4, 2007, Anita suddenly fell out of contact with her family. Her mother Sharon grew increasingly concerned after multiple calls went unanswered. With worry mounting, her father Gordon decided to drive to Minot that afternoon to check on his daughter. Upon arriving at her apartment, he noticed Anita's car was still in the parking lot, but the door to her unit was locked and there was no response when he knocked repeatedly. As the situation became more alarming, Gordon reached out to the property manager for assistance in accessing the apartment. A maintenance worker nearby approached him and pointed out something troubling. The screen from Anita's window was lying on the ground and had been slashed. Gordon looked through the window and saw a horrifying sight. His daughter's body lying on a blood-soaked mattress, partially covered by a robe. The Minot police arrived on the scene at approximately 5:12 p.m. that day. Inside the apartment, they found Anita lying face down on her bed. She was pronounced deceased at the scene, having suffered multiple stab wounds. The grim discovery marked the beginning of a complex and heartbreaking investigation into the crime. Early on, it appeared that Anita's demise was the result of an attack by an unknown intruder. However, the investigators found the situation troubling, especially because they could not determine the nature of the relationship between Anita and her perpetrator. Detectives began to consider that the suspect might not have been a stranger at all. Based on early evidence and the state of the scene, they believed that Anita and her perpetrator likely had a personal connection. The investigators learned that Anita had not reported for work at the Fairfield Inn on June 2nd, which was out of character for her. Her last known contact had taken place on June 1st, during a phone conversation with her mother shortly after she returned to her apartment from work. As the investigation continued, Minot police were approached by a woman who reported seeing a suspicious figure. She described a man, believed to be in his early 20s, running away from the direction of Anita's apartment on 4th Street Northwest at approximately 7:30 a.m. on June 3rd. While this sighting was significant, it did not lead to an immediate breakthrough. The man was never identified and no solid connection to the crime could be established. An autopsy revealed that Anita's life was ended due to 2 stab wounds to the chest. A small pocket knife, believed to be the crime weapon, was recovered and taken into custody. With no arrests and no clear suspect, the case eventually went cold. In 2018, over a decade later, there was a renewed push for answers. The the Minot Police Department assigned fresh investigators to re-examine the case. These new eyes reviewed old evidence, re-interviewed witnesses, and revisited statements made by individuals who had been considered possible suspects in the past. Their goal was to find something previously overlooked, anything that might offer a new lead or uncover the truth that had eluded them for so long. The progress continued into 2021 when Minot Police decided to partner with the television series Cold Justice. The collaboration brought experienced cold case experts and additional resources to assist in reviewing Anita's case. This renewed investigation placed particular focus on inconsistencies in statements made by Nicole Rice, Anita's roommate at the time. Investigators began to revisit details that had once seemed inconclusive. One of the most significant developments came from a report involving Nicole's ex-boyfriend. According to his account, Nicole had allegedly confessed to ending the life of Anita during a period between 2008 and 2009. These confessions reportedly occurred while Nicole was belligerently drunk at social gatherings, where she was overheard saying, "I did it." The ex-boyfriend admitted that he had not taken the statements seriously at the time and never reported them until years later. This information, combined with other evidence and renewed scrutiny of Nicole's statements, led to a major break in the case. In March 2022, Minot Police arrested Nicole Rice, formerly known as Nicole Thomas, and formally charged her. Nicole pleaded not guilty to the charges, and her trial began on March 18, 2025. The eventual not guilty verdict on March 26 shocked Anita's family and friends. Anita's sister, Anna, later expressed her disappointment in the decision and said in a statement, "I spent the last week reliving some of the hardest parts of the last 18 years of my life. And in those 18 years, one thing I have learned is that a not guilty verdict does not mean innocence. I cannot say the same for many of the people in that room, but my conscience is clear. The case remains open." Betsy Ertzmer. Betsy Ruth Ertzmer, born on July 11, 1926, in Holland, Michigan, was just 22 years old when her life was tragically cut short. The youngest of 4 children, Betsy initially studied English and art at the University of Michigan before transferring to Pennsylvania State University after graduation. Her long-term boyfriend, David Wright, was a medical school student at the same university. Reflecting on the loss of his girlfriend years later, David often wondered what might have happened if Betsy had stayed with him that weekend when she was murdered. David had planned to marry Betsy. On November 28, 1969, she was in the library working on a research paper when fellow students found her collapsed on the floor. Bystanders assumed she had suffered a seizure or fainted and began performing CPR. The campus hospital was alerted, and by 5:19 p.m., an ambulance took Betsy to the Rittenor Health Center, where she was pronounced dead shortly after. It wasn't until doctors examined her body that they discovered she had been stabbed once through the left breast. Betsy was wearing a red dress that concealed her blood, and she had bled into her lungs, leaving little blood around the wound. Investigators later concluded that she had probably been stabbed from behind, as there were no defensive injuries on her hands or arms. They theorized that Betsy was likely familiar with her killer and did not fear him. Reportedly, just minutes after the stabbing, 1 or 2 men left the library and told the clerk, "Somebody better help that girl." One witness claimed there was only one blind man. It's unknown whether it was 1 or 2 men, and in either case he or they remain unidentified. On the back of the murder, police began their investigation and held 5,000 interviews in the course of it. They made no arrests and pinned down few suspects. Nobody seemed to have a bad word to say about Betsy, and she was described as smart and good-natured and had no known enemies. Whilst David Wright, her boyfriend, was considered a person of interest initially, he was quickly ruled out when their good relationship was vouched for by those who knew the couple. And according to friends, he didn't leave the study group he was in on the day of the murder, providing him with a rock-solid alibi. Witnesses were few and far between in Betsy's case. Some reported hearing a scream, while others told of the sound of falling books or shelves, likely from when the student collapsed among the stacks in the library. Consequently, 3 drawings were released of witnesses that police couldn't track down. But unfortunately, these illustrations were highly generic, and it appears that the witnesses were never found. The murder weapon was also never recovered, leaving investigators with little to go on. To make matters worse, the murder scene had actually been cleaned up by a janitor after Betsy was taken to hospital, leaving police with even less to work with as any crime scene clues were now gone. Despite the lack of leads or information, police did eventually find several suspects. An early suspect in the case was a man named Robert Dirge, a 27-year-old English professor who died in a car crash in Michigan about 3 weeks after the murder. He was investigated and cleared, although it's unknown what drew him into the eye of the police as a person of interest in the first place. It was also briefly speculated that the infamous Ted Bundy was responsible for the killing, as he'd attended Temple University in Pennsylvania in 1969 and was a frequent visitor of university libraries. However, he was also ruled out. Another fleeting suspect was some kind of military man given the precision of the wound. It was later theorized that perhaps Betsy had stumbled upon a gay couple or encounter and was killed so that she wouldn't tell of anything she'd witnessed. This was thought because when a black light was used on the area where she was found, it revealed human bodily fluids. But the stacks were notorious for couples doing drugs and having sex, so it couldn't really be determined that Betsy had seen anything. The biggest suspect in the case was a man named Richard Hefner, sometimes referred to as Rick. Just hours after the murder, before the news broke, Hefner went to the home of his Penn State professor and asked if they had heard the news about Betsy. It seems that Richard had dated the 22-year-old woman for a brief time, and Hefner told police that their relationship came to an end in October of 1969. Despite the fact that at the time, Betsy had been dating David Wright, and they'd been discussing marriage. Hefner told authorities that he didn't know of the murder until the day after it had occurred, contradicting the account that he'd gone to his professor's home to tell of the news of her death. Despite the suspicious circumstances around Hefner, he was never investigated any further. Worryingly, those who knew him referred to him as a sociopath. He reportedly once drove 800 miles to proclaim his love to a woman he barely knew on her doorstep. He also once punctured a neighbor's tire with a knife and threw dog waste through another neighbor's car window. 6 years later, in 1975, Hefner was arrested for molesting a 13-year-old boy, but the trial resulted in a hung jury. After this, he had frequent run-ins with the law. In 1992, he was accused of inappropriate behavior with a child. And in 1998, he was charged with assaulting a woman in a parking lot, which resulted in the victim receiving a dislocated jaw and loosening several teeth. It's widely believed by online spectators and crime authors that Hefner was responsible for the murder of his one-time girlfriend. Although it's unknown why he seems switched from harming women to young boys, an odd leap to say the least. According to Hefner's nephew, he once heard his mother shout, "You killed that girl and now you're killing me." Betsy's nephew is convinced that Hefner was responsible for her murder. Hefner passed away in February 2002, and to this day, it remains uncertain whether he was truly behind the crime. Betsy's family never saw justice for her death, and her former boyfriend, David Wright, continues to wonder about what could have been. 50 years later, Betsy's case remains unsolved. Moving on to the next case. Brian Ninsfield. In January 1997, Brian Dylan Ninsfield was an 18-year-old freshman at Roger Williams University in Bristol, Rhode Island. He was in his second semester and known for being reserved with a small circle of friends. Having experienced his parents' divorce during childhood, Brian and his parents mutually decided on Roger Williams University because of its welcoming, home-like environment. Brian often felt homesick while pursuing his architecture course. In his free time, he enjoyed reading and listening to music by the water near Mount Hope Bridge. However, he was known to feel overwhelmed by the academic demands and struggled to keep up with his studies. On January 31st, Brian's life began to take a troubling turn when he received a disturbing phone call from a former Roger Williams University student. The caller threatened him, claiming he could still access the campus. Following the call, at around 12:30 a.m., Brian contacted his father, asking him to come to the university. Brian's father advised him to contact campus security, but their only suggestion was to change his phone number. A week later, on February 6th, after finishing his literature class, Brian disappeared and was never seen again. His parents were not informed about his disappearance until February 12th. When they arrived at his dorm room, it appeared untouched. But his mother, Marianne, noticed sand in his bed, which alarmed her since Brian was known for being very clean and organized. Not long after his disappearance, Marianne received a call from a woman claiming to be connected to the university. The caller alleged that a school administrator and 2 faculty members were withholding critical information about Brian and his case. However, the line then went dead. Nothing further has come of this lead, and the woman on the other end of the phone has never been 6 months later in September. Labor Day weekend, a mother and daughter walking along the Hog Island beach located a few miles from Brian's school stumbled across the ghastly discovery of a shoe on the shore, which contained part of a foot inside. DNA showed that the limb belonged to Brian, as did a shin bone that was found nearby. No other remains have ever been found, and the student was presumed dead upon the discovery. Eventually, the man who'd made the threatening phone calls to Brian was identified. He was a former student named Josh Cohen, and was pointed out by campus officials. While Josh and Brian were friends during Brian's first semester, it has been suggested that the two were possibly romantically involved, although no one can say for certain. It's alleged that the relationship ended just weeks before Brian's disappearance. While Cohen admitted to making the phone calls, he claimed they were all in jest. Authorities do not believe that Josh Cohen is involved with Brian's disappearance. There are several theories regarding the case of Brian Ninsfield. Police speculate he accidentally fell into the river beneath Mount Hope Bridge, or that perhaps he jumped from the bridge itself. His parents believe their son fell victim to foul play, and that Cohen, who had made the distressing phone calls, was responsible. Another theory put forward by online investigators is that perhaps Cohen was going to come forward about their relationship, and Brian committed suicide as a result, as he was unhappy or uncomfortable with the decision. Brian's parents largely blamed Roger Williams University for failing to notify them when their son vanished. As the first 24 hours are so precious in a missing persons case, they felt they'd have had a better chance of finding Brian alive had they been alerted sooner. His father, Stephen, said, "I remember just this uncaring, unsympathetic, unconcerned by the university." Stephen and Marian later went on to sue the school, although it's uncertain if they won their case or not. They also pushed for a national law requiring faster parental notification when a student goes missing. Roger Williams University exhibited questionable behavior regarding Brian Ninsfield's disappearance. Reportedly, someone in the admissions office instructed university tour guides to tell anyone asking about Brian that he was safe at home with his parents. Additionally, there were allegations that individuals at the university were subtly discouraged from providing information, though the exact methods remain unclear. Staff members were also reportedly directed not to answer any student inquiries about the case. Minimal action seems to have been taken concerning Brian's disappearance, which was largely brushed aside by both the university and local law enforcement. The reasons behind this lack of attention remain unclear, but without proper action from officials, Brian's case may remain unsolved indefinitely. Moving on to the next case. Carlina Renee White. Carlina Renee White was born on July 15, 1987, at Harlem Hospital Center in New York City. When she was 19 old, her parents, Joy White and Carl Tyson, took her back to the hospital after she developed a high fever. A woman, dressed as a nurse, assisted the parents upon their arrival. Unbeknownst to them, this woman was not actually a hospital employee. In the early hours of the morning, she took Carlina from the hospital, kidnapping her. At the time, the hospital's video surveillance system was not functioning, leaving Carlina's parents as the only ones able to describe the woman who took their daughter. This marked the first baby abduction from a New York hospital. Despite widespread distribution of flyers featuring Carlina's image across the country, efforts to locate her proved unsuccessful. In response, her parents filed a $100 million lawsuit against the hospital, ultimately securing a $750,000 settlement. The woman that took Carlina is Anujita and Pedwi. She raised Carlina as Nedra and Nednance in Connecticut. Carlina first suspected that and might not be a real mother when and could not provide a birth certificate. In February 2005, when Carlina fell pregnant and asked again, and provided her with a false certificate. The officials noticed it was forged, however. Carlina then confronted Anne, and confessed then as she was not Carlina's real mother. She lied, however, by telling Carlina as she was abandoned by a drug addict. This caused her to not immediately go look for her real parents. When she was 23 years old, she had started looking on websites for missing people such as the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. There she found a picture of the kidnapped Carlina and noticed that it's similar to the baby pictures she have of herself as Nedra and those of her daughter Simone. She used the hotline to finally get into contact with her birth family. DNA would prove in 2011 that she is indeed the missing Carlina White. And Pedway is currently serving a 12-year prison sentence in a federal correctional institution in Aliceville, Alabama for the abduction. Carlina now goes by the name Nitty since it is a name she gave herself. She does have a relationship with her biological parents, and they are making up for lost time. Moving on to the next case. Daisy Evelyn Shelton. What if a long unsolved mystery from the past were to unfold, uncovering dark secrets and concealed truths? How would a community cope with the revelation of a brutal crime after decades of uncertainty? And what occurs when a confession finally offers new hope in solving a cold case? In June 1964, a fisherman discovered a dismembered human arm in a gravel pit east of Tip City, located along State Route 571 in Ohio. This horrifying find led to a thorough search to uncover the remainder of the remains. Attempts to drain the gravel pit were unsuccessful, leaving investigators frustrated and in search of new clues. For days later, another fisherman uncovered a disturbing find: a burlap bag in a section of the old Miami-Erie Canal. Inside the bag was a dismembered human torso. The mystery deepened as a head and a leg were later discovered in the same canal, gradually revealing more of the grim puzzle. The remains were identified as 43-year-old Daisy Evelyn Shelton, a mother from Dayton, Ohio. Daisy resided on Springfield Street and was employed at Delco, an automotive electronics company. According to a missing persons report filed by her daughter, Rita, Daisy was last seen in late August 1963. She had told her daughter that she would return home soon, but never did. Known for her generous nature, Daisy was always there to support those around her and was beloved by her family for her helpfulness. Her life had been cut short, and the circumstances of her demise sent shock waves through the community. Despite the initial fervor of the investigation, leads quickly dried up and the case grew cold. Decades passed without resolution until 2017, when an unexpected break in the case emerged. In a twist that could only be described as fate, a man fearing he was near his end in a hospital bed made a startling confession to a nurse. He claimed to have witnessed the slaying of Daisy Shelton. Fearing his own impending death, the man felt compelled to confess, disclosing long-hidden truths. Miraculously, he survived, and detectives seized the opportunity to interview him. The witness, whose identity was kept confidential for his safety, shared a chilling account of the events leading to Daisy's murder. His vivid recollection of the crime provided crucial details that had eluded investigators back in 1964, offering new insights into a case that had remained unresolved for decades. The witness recounted that he saw an individual take her life by striking her on the head with a hammer at a home on Springfield Street in Dayton. The brutality of the act left a mark on the witness, who described the scene in grim detail. After the initial blow, Daisy Shelton was dismembered in the home by two more men. Her body parts were then discarded in various bodies of water in and around Tip City. Effectively, scattering the evidence made the investigation more challenging for the authorities at the time. The suspect, who was the only one linked to the hammer, cooperated with detectives and agreed to several interviews. Initially, he firmly denied knowing Daisy Shelton, even though they lived on the same street and worked for the same company. However, during an interview in August 2017, his facade began to unravel. Hesitantly, he confessed to knowing Daisy, marking a crucial turning point in the investigation. As the interviews progressed, detectives meticulously pieced together the suspect's movements and interactions with Daisy. They discovered inconsistencies in his statements and unexplained gaps in his alibi for the time of Daisy's slaying. The pressure mounted as forensic evidence combined with the witness's detailed account painted an increasingly damning picture of the suspect's involvement. Detectives explored the possibility of personal vendettas, financial disputes, and other motives that could have led to her brutal slaying. To build a comprehensive case, detectives turned to modern forensic techniques. They re-examined the burlap bag and other physical evidence, hoping to find DNA traces or fingerprints that could irrefutably link the suspect to the crime. Advances in forensic science allowed them to analyze the evidence with a precision that was unimaginable in 1964. The community's response to the reopened case was mixed. For some, the resurfacing of such a horrific crime brought back painful memories, while for others, it reignited a long-dormant hope for justice. Media coverage of the case intensified, with many in Dayton and Tip City following the developments closely. The suspect himself brought up the topic of a box voluntarily, suggesting he could explain why his DNA might be found on it. He claimed it was all a setup, orchestrated by the eyewitness to implicate him. Despite his attempt to deflect suspicion, he admitted that the box had indeed been in his home on Springfield Street. The suspect conceded that a box from his house had been used to carry Daisy's body parts. This admission was a critical breakthrough. The suspect further admitted that it was possible Daisy had lost her life in his home. This was a significant shift from his previous answers, aligning more closely with the witness's account. These admissions combined with the forensic evidence strengthened the case against him. The suspect confessed that he looked guilty and could possibly be convicted in court. He admitted that the mounting evidence, his connection to the box, the location sling, and his relationship with Daisy painted a damning picture. Despite his claims of being framed, his own statements had inadvertently solidified his status as the prime suspect in Daisy's case. They continue to build their case, piecing together the timeline of events leading up to Daisy's demise. They scrutinized the suspect's background, seeking any history of violent behavior or other potential motives. In light of the new evidence and the suspect's partial confessions, the case against him grew stronger. The prosecution prepared to present a comprehensive narrative that would encompass the witness testimony, forensic findings, and the suspect's own incriminating statements. The goal was to provide a clear and convincing argument that would lead to a conviction and finally bring justice to Daisy Shelton. The witness testified at a grand jury hearing but lost his life before the suspect could be prosecuted. The suspect, who was not named, passed away in September 2022 at the age of 92. Despite his demise, the grand jury hearing provided crucial insights into the case. They revealed the depth of the investigation and the compelling evidence gathered against him. The suspect's testimony and the findings were meticulously documented, ensuring that Daisy Shelton's story would not fade into obscurity. Law enforcement officials and legal experts analyzed the suspect's testimony, and the legal experts analyzed the suspect's testimony and the accumulated evidence. They strived to piece together a comprehensive account of the crime. The courage of the eyewitness, who broke his silence after so many years, was instrumental in reigniting the case. His detailed confession, alongside the suspect's reluctant admissions, solidified the narrative of Daisy Shelton's tragic end. Although the suspect's demise precluded a formal trial, the investigation's transparency brought some solace to the community. Public statements from detectives affirm that every effort had been made to uncover the truth and bring justice to light. Finally, after 60 years, on March 29, 2024, the Miami County Sheriff's Office announced that prosecutor Anthony Kendall determined Daisy Shelton's case was solved. They decided this due to the suspect, who has now passed away, as well as other evidence. Daisy's granddaughter, Maria Walling, said that her father, Rodney, also passed away before learning what happened to his mom. Maria said they never found the slayer when they found all the body parts, and it really messed him up. She knows the names of the men involved in her grandmother's slaying, but deputies will not release them. I'm like, finally, they found the perpetrators. There were 3. I can't help but feel for the families who will soon learn the truth about how my grandmother's life was taken. While Daisy's family now knows who was responsible for her death, the police have yet to determine a clear motive. Though Daisy Shelton's case may never reach a courtroom verdict, the tireless search for justice, fueled by modern forensic advancements and the courage of a key witness, has ensured that her story is no longer forgotten by time. Moving on to the next case. Benjamin Kyle. On August 31, 2004, at 5 a.m., a Burger King employee in Richmond Hill, Georgia, made an alarming discovery. Behind the restaurant, he found a man who was unconscious, sunburned, and completely naked. The man seemed to have been there for some time, as his body was covered in numerous ant bites. The employee immediately contacted emergency services, and the man was transported to Candler Hospital in Savannah for medical care. Without any identification on him, the man was initially recorded as Burger King Doe in the hospital records. It took 2 weeks for him to regain consciousness. Once awake, he stated that he believed his name was Benjamin, and he chose the last name Kyle, explaining that his initials could match the name of the place where he was found. Afterward, Benjamin was transferred to Memorial Health University Medical Center for further care. They noticed that he had cataracts in both his eyes. A charity was kind enough to pay for his operation to get it removed. Finally, 9 months after he was found, he could see himself in a mirror. Benjamin was surprised to see that he was 20 years older than he believed he was. The next few years spent time in shelters and care centers. In February 2007, he was diagnosed with dissociative amnesia. Benjamin also spent some time being homeless. It was hard finding a job since he couldn't remember his social security number. There were some people that tried to help him remember things from his past so that he could find his family. They looked through missing person databases, but he wasn't in there. What did help, though, was he started to remember certain things. He remembered that he was born 10 years before Michael Jackson. The part of his social security number he could later remember was consistent with numbers assigned in Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, and Indiana. In 2015, with advances in DNA technology, his sample was taken so it could be entered into a database. Parabon Nanolabs, led by C.C. Moore, led the way in the search for his real identity. Initial results that came back showed that his last name is most likely Powell, and that he is a descendant of a 19th century man named Abraham Lovely Powell. On September 16, 2015, he announced that his real identity has been found. He now knew his real name and close family members. In 2016, he said that his real name is William Burgess Powell. He was born on August 29, 1948 in Lafayette, Indiana. So, remembered correctly that he was born 10 years before Michael Jackson. In 1976, he cut ties with his family and moved to Boulder, Colorado. It's still not really known what happened to him, as it led to him being found. Moving on to the next case. Andrew Gostin. In February 2007, Andrew lived with his parents and sister in Doncaster. On the morning of September 14th, he prepared for school, but he waited in a nearby park until his parents had left for work. Afterward, he returned home, changed out of his uniform, placed it in the washing machine, and took his PSP, leaving the charger behind. There was 100 in his room, but Andrew did not take this money. Instead, he withdrew £200 from his bank account, went to Doncaster railway station, and bought a one-way ticket to London before boarding the 9:35 a.m. train to King's Cross. Witnesses saw him getting on the train alone. The ticket seller at Doncaster recalled Andrew because he declined a return ticket, despite it costing only £0.50 more. Eyewitnesses on the train later reported seeing Andrew, describing him as quiet, and noted that he played with his PSP throughout the journey. He would be captured on CCTV at approximately 11:20 a.m. CCTV imagery of Gosden at King's Cross was not checked until 27 days after his disappearance, by which time the trail had gone cold. CCTV images showed Andrew leaving King's Cross station on the day that he vanished. That was the last confirmed sighting of him. 1 year after Andrew's disappearance, an unidentified man spoke into the intercom at the doorway to Leominster Police Station, claiming to have information about the case. When an officer arrived to answer the door, however, the man had disappeared. There were fears that Andrew may have been groomed by someone that he met online. This was investigated, but searches of his sister's laptop, which he occasionally used, and the school computer found nothing. His parents held the belief that he did not have any social media or email accounts that they were aware of. He also did not own a mobile phone. There was speculation that Andrew may have traveled to the capital to end his own life. His family doubted this but did not rule it out. They paid a company to search the Thames using sonar equipment. A body was found, but it was not Andrew. A further theory was that Andrew ran away in search of a new life. It was reported that his favorite TV show featured a character that left his old life and changed his identity. His parents have continued to put money in his bank account just in case he needs it. However, it has remained untouched since the day he left. After more than 10 years, there is still no trace of Andrew Gostin or any explanation for his mysterious train trip. Denise Balser. Denise Balser was a 24-year-old woman residing in Raymond, New Hampshire, and working as a bookkeeper for a small company. On January 17, 1985, she vanished, leaving behind only one clue, a note. When her husband returned home, he discovered the message, which read, "We've got your wife." A few days later, authorities located her pickup truck parked at Logan Airport in Boston. Denise's social security card, birth certificate, and credit cards were neatly arranged and left in the car. Authorities initially pursued the theory that she had been kidnapped but found no substantial evidence beyond the cryptic note. Later, they considered the possibility that she had left voluntarily, though her close-knit family suspected foul play. A year after her disappearance, Denise was indicted in absentia for embezzling $12,000 from her employer. With no further leads, the case eventually went cold. That was until 17 years later in February 2002. It was then that the FBI believed that they found her. She was now going by the name of Denise Jones. She was still a bookkeeper and had started a new family. 42-year-old Denise was elated to see her family when they knocked on the door. She explained that her boss wanted to end her life because of the embezzlement. Denise claimed that it was closer to a $100,000 that she embezzled. The county prosecutors dropped the charges against her because her former boss was long deceased. Denise lived in South Carolina, the Bahamas, California, and Hawaii, while she was missing and lived in Florida since 1996. Her current husband was stunned, but said a lot of things that didn't make sense before did now. Denise would always be depressed on Mother's Day and out of sorts on holidays. She never talked about her family. Moving on to the next case. Derek Michael Mason. In January 1992, the remains of an unidentified individual were found alongside the Pennsylvania Turnpike in Clay Township, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania State Police responded to the scene and determined that the remains belonged to a male, estimated to be 5 feet 10 inches tall and between 18 and 30 years old. The cause of death was believed to be homicide. At the time of his discovery, the man was wearing a light blue long-sleeve sweater from Kate Collins and a size 36 pair of men's Fruit of the Loom jockey-style underwear. The man also had a scar on his chest from a previous bullet wound that had healed. In April 2017, details of the case were entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Person System. Despite extensive efforts by law enforcement investigators to identify the man, no matches were found. The case went cold due to a lack of viable leads. In 2022, the Pennsylvania State Police submitted forensic evidence to Othram. Othram scientists successfully developed a DNA extract from the forensic evidence. They used forensic-grade genome sequencing to build a comprehensive DNA profile for the unknown man. After successfully completing the process, the DNA profile was delivered to a PSP analyst, who performed the necessary work to generate new investigative leads in the case. A follow-up investigation was conducted using the new leads that led investigators to potential relatives of the man. This investigation led to the positive identification of the man, who is now known to be Derek Michael Mason. Derek was last seen leaving his home in the 500 block of South 39th Street in West Philadelphia in October 1991. Derek was known in the area by the names Hawkeye and Hawk. He was never reported missing. Anyone with information regarding the slaying of Derek Mason is asked to contact Trooper Brian McNally, PSP Lancaster. at 717-290-1967. PSP Tips is offering a $2,000 reward for any information that leads to an arrest in this case. Moving on to the next case. Kieran and Ornith Murphy. Kieran and Ornith Murphy were an Irish couple who relocated to the United States in the 1960s. Kieran worked as an actuary for San Francisco's Employee Retirement System office, while Ornith was an expert solo sailor. Ornith was well known in the sailing community and occasionally sailing magazines. She owned a 1980 39-foot fiberglass auxiliary sailboat named Sola 3. The vessel featured dark blue circular emblems with a gray swirl painted on both sides, making it easily recognizable. The couple lived in San Francisco and had two sons, David and Patrick. Kieran did not know how to sail, and being on the water made him seasick, but he did help with the maintenance of the boat. They had amassed a small fortune through real estate speculation. 4 years, Kieran and Ornith lived a happy life, but in 2001 their marriage started to fall apart due to Kieran having an affair. The couple were in the midst of getting a divorce later in the year. Along with the potential divorce, the Murphys were also facing a potentially costly lawsuit stemming from a 1999 fire at one of their apartment complexes, which severely burned a 2-year-old girl. At the time, Kieran was living in an apartment in Nob Hill and Ornith had moved in with her niece in Oakland. Her boat was docked at the Oakland Marina in the Jack London Square area of the city. On December 15, 2001, both Kieran and Ornith would vanish along with Ornith's sailboat. Kieran was last seen at a Christmas office party on December 14th. Kieran has never been heard from again. His friends and family became concerned when he failed to report for work on December 17th, and they filed a missing persons report. It was at this point that they realized that Ornith was also missing. Ornith was last seen in Oakland on December 16th, the day after Kieran had gone missing. The sailboat disappeared on the same day as Ornith and has never been located. It was found that Kieran and Ornith had planned to meet on December 15th to discuss legal issues. Ornith was seen working on her boat that afternoon. A witness reported seeing a man on board who was similar in appearance to Kieran. However, it was never established if he really was Kieran. Witnesses also reported hearing a loud noise coming from the boat in the evening. They described it as a banging noise. However, they weren't sure if the sounds were of gunshots. The boat was captured on video surveillance pulling out of the Oakland Marina at 8:36 p.m. that night. The boat was not equipped for long-distance sailing. It had about 1 week's worth of food on it when it disappeared, but no safety or foul weather gear. The next morning, Ornith called her niece from the boat and said she was in the marina in Berkeley. Her niece invited her to breakfast, but Ornith declined the invitation. No one ever heard from Kieran or Ornith again. Kieran's friends say that Kieran was planning on a trip to Mexico after Christmas. The couple's sons say it would be uncharacteristic of them to leave without warning. One theory surrounding the disappearance of Kieran and Ornith Murphy suggests that Ornith shot Kieran and then took her own life shortly afterward. However, there is no concrete evidence to support this theory. Despite the speculation, neither of the couple's credit cards nor their bank accounts have been accessed since their disappearances. Now, 18 years later, the Murphys remain missing, with no definitive answers about what happened to them during that time. Moving on to the next case. Maritza Gleamed Grimmett. In April 1983, children discovered the skeletal remains of an unidentified individual in a culvert in what is now Lake Forest, California. Responding to the scene near Old Trabuco and Canada Roads, an excavation was conducted to recover more remains. Upon examination, it was determined that the remains belonged to a female who was likely black or of mixed race. She was estimated to be between 5 feet 3 inches and 5 feet 6 inches tall, and between the ages of 18 and 24. Jane Doe was also noted to have a distinctive gold tooth. It was determined that the woman had been the victim of a homicide. In August 2010, the details of the case were entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Person System. Over the years, multiple forensic renderings of the woman were released in hopes of generating new leads. Despite extensive efforts by law enforcement to identify her, no matches were found, and the case eventually went cold due to a lack of viable leads. In 2022, the Orange County Sheriff's Department submitted forensic evidence to Othram, hoping that advanced DNA testing could help to finally identify the woman. Othram scientists successfully developed a DNA extract from the forensic evidence and used forensic-grade genome sequencing to build a comprehensive DNA profile for the unknown woman. After successfully completing the process, the DNA profile was delivered to the FBI's Forensic Genetic Genealogy team, and the FBI team performed the necessary work to generate new investigative leads in the case. Using these new leads, investigators contacted a distant genetic relative of the victim, who suggested Jane Doe's forensic renderings be posted to a Facebook group for Jane Doe's and missing women from the 1970s-1980s. Approximately 1 month after the posting, a woman contacted investigators and said she believed the Lake Forest Jane Doe could be her missing mother. Lake Forest Jane Doe is now known to be Maritza Glean Grimmett, a Panamanian native, married a U.S. Marine in the summer of 1978, and gave birth to a daughter. In late 1978, the family moved to the U.S. The family resided in Columbus, Ohio, and Millington, Tennessee in late 1978 through mid-1979. In July 1979, the couple was going through a divorce. Maritza told her sister she was going to California. Her family never heard from her again since. She was 20 years old at the time of her disappearance. Investigators are actively investigating Maritza's slaying. Anyone with information on this case is asked to contact Investigator Bob Taft at 714-647-7045 or coldcase@oaksheriff.gov. Anonymous tips may be submitted to OC Crime Stoppers at 855-847-6227 or at occrimestoppers.org. Moving on to the next case. Lynn Scholes. Lynn Scholes, a 17-year-old freshman at Middlebury College in Middlebury, Vermont, was looking forward to her final exams in December 1971. She had studied diligently for her English drama exam scheduled for 1 p.m. on December 10th. At 12:55 p.m., Lynn left her dormitory with her friends to head to the exam. However, on the way there, she realized she had forgotten her lucky pen and told her friends she was going back to retrieve it from her room. That would be the last time Lynn was seen by her friends. She never returned to take her exam, and when they went to her dorm room, she was nowhere to be found. Although her friends initially thought it was strange, they waited for 2 days before reporting her as missing. A week later, her parents were informed of her disappearance. Lynn's personal belongings, including her checkbook, identification, and wallet, were left behind in her dorm room. During the police investigation, they found that on the day Lynn went missing, she was seen outside of a health food store called All the Good Things, eating prunes, just prior to meeting up with her friends to take the exam at around 12:30 p.m. During that time, she had reportedly mentioned to someone that she was going to be going to New York, but that the bus had already left. Lynn then returned to campus where she had that walk with her friends and reportedly claimed she left her pen back in her dorm room. Later that day, witnesses reported to have seen Lynn again, standing at the same bus stop where she was seen earlier around 2:15 p.m. This 2:15 p.m. confirmed sighting of her would be the last. Police at the time considered the possibility that Lynn had left of her own accord. Lynn had previously sent letters to her family stating she was homesick and was thinking of withdrawing from school. However, her friends and family said she was looking forward to going back to her home in Addison County, Vermont for the Christmas holidays, and they do not believe she would have run away. There were several sightings of Lynn in the days following her disappearance, but none of them were confirmed. The case would soon grow cold. Then in February 2015, a tip led investigators to link Robert Durst as suspect in Lynn's disappearance. Robert Durst was the owner of the All Good Things health food store, the same store that Lynn was last seen eating prunes in front of. Moreover, the store was across the street from the bus stop where Lynn was also seen. Robert Durst is the prime suspect in his wife Kathleen Durst's disappearance, and is also a suspect in the unsolved murder of Susan Berman. He was charged and acquitted for the murder of Morris Black in February 2003. He is also considered a possible suspect in several other murders and disappearances. And his complete troubling story is explored in HBO's documentary, The Jinx. Before the tip, Investigators were unaware that Robert Durst had once owned the health food store, All Good Things. However, there is no solid evidence connecting him to Lynn's disappearance, and no new information has been released to the public. The case remains unsolved, and anyone with information about Lynn's whereabouts or what happened to her is urged to contact Detective Chris Bodish at 802-388-3191. Moving on to the next case. Stephanie Nurse. Stephanie Nurse was born on April 28, 1997, at Grootshire Hospital in Cape Town, South Africa. Celeste, her mother, recalled seeing a nurse comforting Stephanie next to her bed before she fell asleep. However, when Celeste woke up, a nurse was urgently asking where Stephanie was. It was then that Celeste realized her daughter had been taken. First, she thought it might have been a cruel joke, but as time went on, it became clear that their daughter had been abducted. Each year on April 28th, a family would celebrate Stephanie's birthday. They also did a lot of interviews to keep the search for her in the media. In July 2009, the family received a call where a woman whispered, "I know about your daughter." The woman then asked the $500,000, which is about $70,000 US. When they went to the spot where the drop-off was supposed to take place, no one arrived to collect the money. The call was later traced to Glenda Debell, who was a neighbor of Celeste Nurse. Linda was charged with extortion. The nurses also had a second daughter, named Cassidy Nurse. She started at a new school in 2015. There she met a girl 4 years older than her that looked very similar to her. Cassidy shared the news with her father, Mornay Nurse, who then arranged to meet a woman named Mikey Solomon. When Mornay saw Mikey, he immediately noticed a striking resemblance, and he began to believe that she might be his daughter, Zephanie. DNA tests were conducted, confirming that Mikey Solomon was indeed Zephanie Nurse. In August 2016, Lavona Solomon, the woman who had taken Zephanie and raised her as her own, was sentenced to 10 years in prison. It is believed that Lavona had concealed a miscarriage and the remainder pregnancy before abducting Zephanie and pretending to have given birth to her. Moving on to the next case. Daniel Entwistle. On May 3, 2003, 7-year-old Daniel Entwistle from Great Yarmouth, England, returned home after running an errand for his mother. After entering the house, Daniel asked his father, David Entwistle, for money to buy some sweets. He left again and was captured on the store's CCTV. Daniel was seen once more on the store's surveillance camera, cycling by. This was the last confirmed sighting of Daniel. His red and white bike was discovered along a harbor wall near the River Yar, about half a mile from his home, at around 3 a.m. on Sunday, May 4th. Authorities initially speculated that he might have fallen into the river and drowned, but his body was never found, possibly swept out to the North Sea. However, Daniel was afraid of water and unable to swim, making it seem unlikely that he would have climbed the harbor wall, putting himself at risk of falling into the river. In February 2003, Joseph Sigier came forward a few days after Daniel disappeared and said he had seen Daniel playing with some kids near a raised wall by the River Yar, where Daniel's bike was found, around lunchtime on May 3rd and again around 4 p.m. that same day. Zaggers said Daniel and other children often played there. What's interesting about Zaggers' claim is that it conflicts with Daniel's mother, Paula's, statement on where she and the family went that day. Paula claimed the whole family went shopping earlier in the day, returned home, and then Paula went to rest as she felt unwell, yet Zager claimed to have seen Daniel playing around lunchtime. Despite a large police search of the area, Daniel was never found. Heartbreakingly, due to few funds and no PR campaign, his disappearance stopped being reported by the media after only a few days, and the case was closed by police just 3 months after he had vanished. The boy's father, David Entwistle, died in February 2015. It is worth noting that David was convicted of having sex with a 12-year-old girl back in 1985. Police were aware of the conviction when Daniel vanished, but it was never made public. David was interviewed by detectives before his death in the search for his son, but never made a suspect. Daniel remains missing to this day. Moving on to the next case. Keenan Day Bennett. In criminal cases, Proving that a crime has taken place can be challenging when there is no body. Without this key evidence, the defense can argue that there is sufficient room for doubt, suggesting that the victim may have disappeared voluntarily. Historically, securing a conviction in murder cases without a body has been difficult. However, with advancements in forensic technology, we are now witnessing more cases where justice is achieved despite the absence of a body. On September 29, 2002, Vartasha McCullough informed Kmart staff that her 4-year-old daughter, Cananda Bennett, was missing. According to McCullough, they had visited the Kmart in Whiteville, North Carolina around 5 p.m. when the girl disappeared. Initially, McCullough claimed that Cananda vanished from an aisle in the store. However, she later revised her statement, saying she had entered the Kmart thinking her daughter was behind her, only to turn around and find her missing. McCullough and her daughter were from Conway, South Carolina, and had been visiting Cananda's uncle in Whiteville at the time. Although the Kmart staff called emergency CCTV cameras in the store, there was no footage showing the 4 of CCTV cameras in the store. There was no footage showing the 4-year-old. Investigators also found no evidence that Cananda had even entered the state. Aside from her parents, McCullough and Eddie Bennett Jr., who went by Kevin, no one had seen her in the 2 days leading up to her disappearance. Authorities searched the couple's car, but there was no child's seat in it, and no other signs that a young child had been present except a single Matchbox toy car, which they found wedged under a seat. As law enforcement officers became more doubtful about the McCullough story, they were approached by further witnesses from the couple's hometown who claimed that they had seen Cananda with bruises on her shoulder and face just days before she vanished. When asked about them, the 4-year-old said, "My mommy did it." While one witness did confront Cananda's mother, McCullough told them, "I'm going to whip her ass for telling you." Further fueling this idea, a second witness seeing cuts on the child's body and marks that looked as if they'd been caused by a strap. And Canine's grandparents had become so concerned for her welfare that on September 29th, the very day she went missing, they told the police in Conway that they suspected the 4-year-old was being abused. They had not seen Cananda in a week, and before contacting police, they went to confront their daughter with their suspicions. But while they heard someone moving around inside her apartment, nobody answered the door. Investigators noted that both of Cananda's parents seemed uninterested in her case and never asked for any updates beyond the first week of the investigation. Additionally, McCullough failed a polygraph test regarding her daughter's disappearance while Cananda's father, Kevin Bennett, refused to take one, although both had samples of their blood and saliva taken. According to the authorities, both were uncooperative and both had inconsistencies in their stories. When McCullough was told that she had failed her polygraph, she reportedly cried. An officer said to her, "We both know that whatever happened to that child did not happen in North Carolina. It happened in that apartment, didn't it?" Here, Cananda's mother reportedly nodded. However, when she was asked to take them to where the body was, she told them she couldn't. After regaining her composure, McCullough retracted her previous admission and maintained that she had lost her daughter while at the Kmart store. When the police searched the family's home in Conway, things got worse. Investigators noted that the home had been sanitized with bleach, the smells still lingering in the air. 3 bottles of the substance, a damp mop, and several towels lay in plain sight. McCullough claimed that she was cleaning the apartment in preparation for an upcoming inspection by housing authorities, but officers believed she was attempting to clean up a crime scene. Searches of the home turned up transfer stains, which are stains left behind when fluid splatters are wiped, which matched Cananda's DNA. Authorities said that the scene would suggest that a physical assault had taken place. Furthermore, Cananda's toys and clothing had been thrown out, as if her parents didn't believe she'd be coming home. And both McCullough and Bennett used past tense when talking about their missing daughter. In February, Hennon's parents were arrested and charged with homicide by child abuse in connection with their daughter's case. Investigators claimed that the DNA evidence found in the apartment proved that the 4-year-old had died in Conway and had never even set foot in South Carolina. This, combined with the numerous witness statements about Cananda's abuse, led to the couple being charged. Around the same time, however, the parents accused the police of racism as they felt they did not conduct enough searches for their daughter. 2 years later, in February, Bennett's charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence. McCullough, however, was charged with more crimes, including unlawful neglects of a child and inflicting grievous bodily harm on a child. Throughout her trial, McCullough maintained her innocence. The prosecution theorized that Cananda's death was unintentional and that her mother had panicked and attempted to conceal the crime. However, the mother of one's defense said that McCullough had always maintained that she was not guilty and that the state has no evidence to the contrary. Despite this, the jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict. McCullough was convicted of all charges and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Reportedly, she burst into tears and clutched a Bible upon hearing this verdict, and her family appeared to be visibly upset by the news. McCullough's father, the one who'd reported his granddaughter's abuse to the police, believes his daughter is innocent. In the years since, McCullough has never told investigators what happened or where Kynane's body is. Kynane's was described as a bright and well-mannered young girl who could read simple words and count to 30. She was a fan of SpongeBob SquarePants. Investigators suspect that her father was involved in her disappearance, and they have stated that they will pursue charges if new evidence emerges. Natasha McCullough is scheduled for release from prison in 2023. Cananda's case marked the first time in South Carolina history that a trial for a child's murder was held without the discovery of a body. Moving on to the next case. Lillian Marie Cardenas. In February 1967, unidentified remains were found at the bottom of a cliff north of Jenner, Sonoma County, California. The remains belonged to a woman who was between 52 and 54 inches tall. She wore a long-sleeved white blouse that buttoned down the back, along with light-colored pants. It was determined that she had likely died the previous year. Her manner of demise was ruled as slaying. She had multiple skull and rib fractures. Despite investigators' attempts, the woman could not be identified. She became known as Sonoma County Jane Doe. A forensic composite was developed. The case was made public in hopes of generating new leads about the woman's identity, but no matches were found. She was buried at the Sonoma County Cemetery. The details of the case were later added to the National Missing and Unidentified Person System. In February 2009, her body was exhumed with the help of Dr. Mark Griffin, an anthropology professor from San Francisco State University. The examination determined that Jane Doe was a white female between 40 and 46 years old. In 2022, the California Department of Justice, in collaboration with the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office, submitted forensic evidence to Arthram, hoping that advanced DNA testing could assist with the identification of the woman. Arthram scientists successfully developed a DNA extract from the forensic evidence. They used forensic-grade genome sequencing to build a comprehensive DNA profile for the unknown woman. Arthram's in-house genealogy team used the DNA profile in a forensic genetic genealogy search to produce new investigative leads, which were returned to investigators. A follow-up investigation was conducted by law enforcement with the new leads. This led to relatives of the unidentified woman. Nearly 60 years after the remains were discovered in Sonoma County, the remains have been identified as Lillian Marie Cardenas, who was born in 1928. Lillian's last known residence was in San Francisco. She had been estranged from her family prior to her demise. The investigation into her demise is ongoing. Investigators ask for anyone with information on Lillian Marie Cardenas to dial 707-565-2727 or email officials at sheriff-coldcase@sonoma-county.org. Moving on to the next case. Xavier Rollins. On June 17, 2014, a young man tragically lost his life outside the River Crossing apartment complex in Texarkana, Texas. Xavier Rollins, a 25-year-old Army veteran, was the beloved son of Charlotte Rollins. Charlotte, despite facing numerous challenges, never gave up in her relentless pursuit of justice for her son. Years later, a breakthrough in the case would finally provide answers to what had once seemed like an unsolvable mystery. Xavier, who shared a close and loving bond with his mother, spent much of his time with her, and their relationship was built on love and mutual support. Everything changed on June 17, 2014, when Xavier was fatally shot outside the River Crossing apartment complex on College Drive. At just 25 years old, he had been out of the Army for 4 years and was working hard to build a future for himself. Although an investigation into his death was launched, no significant leads came forward, and the case remained unsolved, leaving Charlotte to cope with her profound loss. Despite the case going cold, her resolve to seek justice never faltered. On the 8th anniversary of Xavier's death, June 17, 2022, Charlotte organized a balloon release in an effort to renew attention on the case and encourage anyone with information to come forward. This poignant event was not just a tribute to Xavier, but also a call to the community to remember the impact of violence and to support families like hers who are left searching for answers. She expressed the following, encapsulating the longing for closure that she and countless other families endure. If someone came forward, I would know my prayers have been answered. Charlotte brought a banner adorned with photographs of local crime victims, highlighting the ongoing struggle for justice faced by many. She stated, "We have some of them that yes, the case has been solved, but we have a whole lot of them that have not been solved." In 2024, a significant breakthrough occurred in the long unsolved case of Xavier Rollins, renewing hope for his family and friends. The police never ceased their efforts to find justice for Xavier, and Detective Thomas Shaddix had been diligently working on the cold case for several months. His commitment to uncovering the truth led him to discover DNA evidence, testing options that had not been available a decade earlier. Recognizing the potential of this technology, he decided to pursue it, in hopes of finally finding answers for the Rollins family. As Detective Shaddix delved deeper into the investigation, he sought the expertise of the Texas Attorney General's Cold Case and Missing Persons Unit, which provided invaluable assistance. Their collaboration was made possible through a federal grant program from the Department of Justice, allowing them access to numerous resources, including expedited forensic testing. These advanced forensic methods enabled law enforcement to identify 27-year-old Cameron Cheatham as a suspect in the 2014 slaying of Xavier. Following the identification of Cheatham, the Attorney General's office played a critical role in facilitating his arrest. Using the newly uncovered evidence, Detective Shaddix secured a warrant for Cheatham, charging him with capital slaying. Cheatham was not difficult to locate, as he was already in custody at the Bi-State Jail, serving time for a felony probation violation warrant stemming from his arrest in September. This fortunate turn of events allowed the police to expedite the legal process and ensure that justice was being sought for Xavier. On October 1, 2024, Charlotte received the life-changing call she had been longing for. She will never forget the moment when Detective Shaddix informed her of the arrest. Charlotte recalled, her voice filled with emotion, and he said, "We made an arrest, and I just went to screaming and hollering and yelling. I mean, you would have thought that I had just had a baby for the first time. That is what that felt like. It is like, okay, I'm about to get justice for my baby," she shared. "I have got 30 to 40 shirts with his picture on them. Everywhere I went, he was going to see his face." After the arrest, Cheatham was booked on a capital murder charge, with his bond set at a substantial $1 million. The upcoming trial brought a renewed sense of purpose and closure, reigniting the hope that had gradually diminished over the years. Alexander Gawk Slowly, as he was affectionately nicknamed by both his friends and family, was a lively and sports-enthusiastic young man hailing from Holloway, London. His protective nature and budding career aspirations in accounting were tragically cut short by an unsolved disappearance during the February, leaving those who knew him across Holloway and beyond, grappling for answers in a world clouded by mystery. Born on August 14, 1991, to parents Christopher Slowly and Arisa TV, Alexander's early life was filled with love and care. While Christopher's occupation remains unknown, Narissa worked tirelessly as a bookkeeper, ensuring the family stayed afloat. Over the years, the family grew with the births of 3 more children, Latina, Tazra, and Tasha, each forming strong, loving bonds with their older brother Alex. From a young age, Alex took on the role of protector for his younger sisters, always checking in on their experiences at school and ensuring they were safe from any bullies or potential harm. This was a reflection of his deep affection for his family and his innate sense of responsibility. Alex proudly carried his protective nature into adolescence, even as his family dynamics shifted. When his parents, Christopher Slowly and Narissa TV, separated, Narissa was granted full custody of Alex and his 3 younger sisters. Christopher maintained visitation rights, and the children continued to stay in touch with their biological father. Despite the upheaval of the divorce, Alex remained focused on his future, excelling in his studies. His love for mathematics grew during this time, with teachers frequently praising his determination and natural ability to excel in arithmetic. His academic focus on math and science did not diminish, but Alex's path took a creative turn when he enrolled at Islington Arts and Media School, a secondary school that specialized in media arts. His friends affectionately called him Gog, a nickname inspired by his iconic glasses and intellectual, bookish personality. Throughout secondary school, Alex's passion for numbers and precision led him to pursue a career in accounting. His mother, Narissa, a bookkeeper, fully supported his aspirations. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now let's move on with the video. In order to hone his skills and embark on his professional journey, Alex enrolled at City and Islington College to engage in coursework directly related to accounting. Alex was steadily shaping his future with the support of his family and friends, fueled by a deep passion to make his dreams come true. When he wasn't buried in his studies or attending class, Alex was an avid sports fan, with football being his particular favorite. This love for the game likely grew during his time at Islington Arts and Media School, where they had a partnership with Arsenal FC. Alex's interests also extended to food, with a notable fondness for Caribbean cuisine. His friends and family fondly remembered his obsession with dishes like fried plantains, dumplings, and specialty porridges that his mother, Narissa, would sometimes prepare. As he grew older, Alex developed a strong sense of personal style and hygiene, which became a defining feature of his personality by the age of 16. His mother and sisters could always count on him to be well-groomed and impressively dressed, often seen in his Sunday best when the occasion called for it. Everything in Alex's life seemed to be falling into place, and it appeared that he was on track for a bright future. Alex was excelling academically and on track to achieve his goals, feeling comfortable in his own skin. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, tragedy struck in the form of a sudden and alarming disappearance in the midday hours of August 2008. One of the most challenging aspects of Alex Slawley's case is the lack of a clear timeline, with conflicting information being made public regarding his exact disappearance. The following is a timeline constructed based on available details. In early 2008, Alex was reportedly seen driving a vehicle that did not belong to him in North London. During this drive, he was pulled over by the Metropolitan Police and issued a citation for driving underage. At the end of the stop, he was informed that he would have to appear in court later that year. However, there is some debate as to whether this traffic violation was the reason for his court appearance, as conflicting reports have surfaced. Nonetheless, a court appointment for Alex was set for either the February. Fast forward to Friday, August 1st of that year, when reports suggest that Alex's last known activities were actually on July. We will follow the August timeline, which is more generally accepted as the correct time frame. On August 1st, 2008, at some point during the day, Alex leaves his home in the Thane Villas suburb of Islington, just a block away from the bustling intersection of Holloway and 7 Sisters Road. He says goodbye to his mother and sisters, not knowing it will be the last time. As Alex walks out of the house, he leaves most of his belongings behind, including extra cash and his passport. The only item he takes with him is his mobile phone. The day continues, and Alex travels across North London from Islington to Edmonton to visit a friend and spend time there in the evening. As night falls, Alex remains at his friend's house, deciding to stay the night despite not having any change of clothes with him. He plans to return to Islington the following day. On the morning of Saturday, August 2nd, 2008, Alex wakes up still at his friend's house in Edmonton. He informs his anonymous friends that he intends to leave for Islington later that day, so he can be home in time for his birthday celebrations. as his birthday is just 2 days away. A few hours later, around noon, Alex leaves his friend's house and begins his journey home under the harsh midday sun. This is the last confirmed sighting of Alexander Slowly. When Alex doesn't return home to Thane Villas that night, his mother, Nerissa, begins to worry. She contacts Alex's friend, who states that he hasn't seen Alex since he left earlier that day and assumes Alex must have made it home by then. Within the next 24 hours, Nerissa reports her son as missing to the Metropolitan Police. During their initial report, authorities asked Nerissa about the possibility of Alex running away. She reassures them that she never suspected such behavior from her son, describing him as well-mannered, passionate, and with no reason to leave. She also mentions that she has no concerns about Alex being involved with gangs, drugs, or anything nefarious, noting that his only negative behavior was the occasional teenage tantrum. The police then dispatch officers to search for Alex in the following days of early August. They interview those closest to the now 17-year-old accounting students and comb through the surrounding suburbs of North London, but find nothing of note. It doesn't take long for the entire investigation to go cold at the February without any leads or suspects to announce, at least to the inside of the public. Alex's case stays quiet until February, over a year since he was reported missing. Police get wind of a potential sighting by an anonymous witness near Ilford, a small town in East London. They follow up with the reports, but never confirm if the sighting is legitimate or if it happened at all. A month later, in February, a charity in the UK called Missing People team up with the supermarkets chain Iceland to bring awareness to Alex's case. They create a small missing persons poster with Alex's photo and information on it, and print it on over 13,500,000 milk cartons. It is one of the first circumstances of milk cartons featuring a victim of a disappearance in the UK, greatly inspired by the same practice that took fire in the United States in the mid-1980s. Nearly 6 years later, in February, during an interview regarding the case of her missing son, Nerissa shows shock when she learns there were reportedly multiple sightings of Alex in the Greater London area since the first in February. Nerissa says that the police have been mostly uncommunicative with her, and she had only met with them a handful of times since filing a report in February. Another couple of years pass by without any new information surfacing until February, when recently retired head of the Metropolitan Police's Central Images Unit, Mick Neville, publicly spouts a theory about a potential connection between the case of Alex Slowly and the much more discussed case of Andrew Gosden. The comments reignite a brief interest in Alex's case, but they don't bring forth any new leads. The most recent development in the investigation comes in February, 2 full years after Neville's comments. This time, Metropolitan Police reveal an electronic facial identification technique, also called an E-fit simulation of Alex's face. Should he still be alive in the present day? The image displays Alex at 28 years of age, this time with full yet neatly trimmed beard in accordance with his grooming habits. It also depicts Alex without his iconic glasses, instead featuring his vibrant blue eyes he had become synonymous with. It was around the same time that the new detective constable of Metropolitan Police's Missing Persons Unit, Tunboom, released a statement saying Alex's bank accounts, insurance accounts, and passports had all remained inactive in the 11 years since his disappearance, and there were still no active leads in Alex's case, and that it had grown immensely cold with nary a clue or suspect to follow up with. The case remains the same as of 2022. Like so many of the cases we report here at Cold Case Detective, Alexander Slowly's investigation is without many tips or pieces of evidence to run with, as previously stated by multiple members of law enforcement. So while we don't have any physical clues left behind by Alex or an array of social media posts of digital footprints or CCTV footage depicting the 16-year-old, there is still a chance that the latter of these materials exist in one form or another. We'd like to take a moment and ask the viewing public for a favor. If you or anyone you know were around the Greater London area, specifically in North London between the towns of Edmonton and Islington, or used King's Cross to travel through England on or in the following days of July 11th or August 2nd, 2008, check every record you have in the off chance you might have a piece of vital information that could lead to the whereabouts of Alex Slowly. We know this is a shot in the dark, but all it takes is one photograph or forgotten film footage stored on a hard drive long since packed away to break a case wide open. Unfortunately, most businesses and government buildings don't retain CCTV catalogs dating back more than a few days, let alone a decade due to a lack of storage. So reaching out to places in the area that may have had security cameras pointing along the North London streets is a fruitless endeavor. It should never come down to civilians to solve cases or carry the heavy lifting of forgotten victims years down the line. But with how little information we have as a public due to the constraints of official investigators, this is the best shots we all have to give. If you do happen to find anything of importance in your own media files by some miraculous chance, call or text the number 116,000 or call Crime Stoppers UK at 080555111. One call could change the lives of many and at the very least one life in particular. As we've said multiple times, the lack of information on Alex's case makes drawing up detailed theories next to impossible, as even conjecture is difficult when there simply aren't enough details available in a missing persons case. That said, we will do our best to build up the most plausible possibilities to where Alex ended up. The first and most sensible theory is that Alex ran away from home. Whether it was to start a new life or simply to get away from the one he was currently living. This theory is easy to argue against, with most of the evidence we do have suggesting Alex had no plans to leave the Thane villas for good. For instance, Alex left all of his belongings back in his bedroom in Islington. He didn't even bring a change of clothes with him to his friend's house, most likely a sign that his plan wasn't even to spend the night in Edmonton in the first place. Of course, Alex was also a teenage boy, and he simply could have forgotten to pack clothes or felt he didn't need them. Many of us have slept in the clothes we wore at unexpected sleepovers with friends in our teenage years. So it's most likely just a coincidence. People also point to the fact that Alex didn't bring any money with him, nor were his insurance or bank accounts touched after August 2nd, 2008. Again, just because someone runs away doesn't mean they bring every penny they possess along with them. A lot of folks who leave without notice do so without a plan, let alone money. In addition, if someone wanted to run away, they wouldn't want to leave a paper or digital trail in the first place. People often point to an unused cell phone or untapped bank account as proof someone didn't go missing of their own accord. But wouldn't that be intentional if someone didn't want to be found? Could fit either arguments but is circumstantial at the very most. The one clue, or in this case lack thereof, that goes against the runaway theory is the absolute lack of CCTV video or security camera capturing Alex in the area he was last seen. We outlined in the previous section that by the time the police wanted to use these types of resources, the footage was probably no longer in existence. However, there are credible reports. The police at least checked the security tapes they did have access to and couldn't pull a single frame that may have depicted Alex slowly. In the events that the amount of footage Metropolitan detectives had access to was enough to make a sound judgment, it would be incredibly difficult for Alex to evade every single CCTV or hapless camera that he may have come across. Surely, someone somewhere would have snapped a shot of Alex evading notice and stealing away via train or bus. While it's not a certainty that Alex couldn't avoid any and all detection, it just simply isn't likely given his youth and the local circumstances. Another theory involved in the investigation is the idea that Alex's friend has something to do with his disappearance, or at least knows exactly where Alex went in the hours leading up to noon on that fateful Saturday in February 2008. To this day, the name and identity of the friend in question has not been released. This could be for two reasons. The first is that law enforcement is withholding key pieces of evidence in the investigation to deter outside influences interrupting an angle they're taken. The second is that the friend has requested privacy and has already been cleared of any suspicion in the eyes of authorities. Metropolitan Police have said on numerous occasions they have no suspects or leads, so unless they are again lying to protect the investigation, the first reason doesn't make sense. It's more likely the friend was telling the truth and after an interview or two was no longer a vital part to the case and has since remained anonymous for the protection of himself and his family. However, because we don't have a clear reasoning, it does leave room to wonder how much that friend actually knows. If anything, they would have incredible insight into Alex's behavior in the 24 hours leading up to the disappearance. He would know better than anyone if Alex was disturbed or acting differently. We could also consider the possibility that something transpired between Alex and his friend the night Alex stayed over. Perhaps the two had an argument or found themselves in some trouble, with only one managing to escape. Fearing retaliation, the friend might have remained silent, leaving Alex's fate a mystery. While this theory cannot be entirely ruled out, we can reasonably assume that if anything significant had happened between the two boys during the 24 hours leading up to Alex's disappearance, the friend's parents or guardians would have been aware of it and interviewed by law enforcement. Even if the parents were unaware of any mischief the boys might have caused, any violent incident in or around Edmonton that night, or early the following morning would likely have been reported by someone else, prompting the police to investigate further. However, ruling out this theory relies heavily on trusting the authorities. Although many detectives and officers successfully resolved disappearances and crimes, there have been instances where critical information was withheld from Alex's own mother. For example, potential eyewitness sightings were not shared with her. Even if these sightings were quickly debunked, a grieving mother of a missing child should still have been informed of them. It makes the detectives handling the case look quite peculiar. Other people may discount the theory that Alex's friend was somehow involved due to Narissa's explanation that Alex was a good student, hung out with well-mannered friends, and wasn't a part of the gang or drug scene. While it may be more pleasant to think of Alex as his mother saw him, the fact of the matter is many teenagers carry themselves one way in front of their parents and another in front of their friends. This is not to insinuate Alex led a troubled second life or was a badly behaved teenager when adults weren't looking, but it is possible he could have found himself in a negative situation with his friends at the complete ignorance of the people who cared for him. Of course, if this is the case, it is vital that those who knew Alex on a personal level beyond his immediate family come forward with information. We are optimistic that if Alex was truly into something he shouldn't have been, a friend would have come forward, but it is no guarantee. Plus, Alex might have involved himself with something not even his best friends knew, and therefore not even theories that his friend was somewhat responsible does us any good to conjecture about. The most believable theory in the case of Alex Slowly is that somewhere on his journey from Edmonton, he was kidnapped and taken against his will by someone or a group of perpetrators unbeknownst to us. Who exactly could have done such a thing is impossible to say at the moment, as anyone who was in North London on August 2, 2008 could be considered a suspect. However, it's a comment made by one of the investigating detectives back in February that leads to a very curious scenario. Just under 4 years ago, the retired head of Central Images Unit, Mick Neville, suggested Alex Slalley's disappearance may be connected to a similar case in nature, that of 14-year-old Andrew Gosden, who went missing in central London on September 14, 2007, less than 1 year before Alex would himself. Andrew was an introverted yet mature young boy from the suburb of Balby in Doncaster, South Yorkshire. He spent much of his life excelling at school, much like Alex. He loved Cub Scouts and taking mathematics. Andrew was even involved with gifted programs throughout school and won awards for his arithmetic abilities. In the weeks leading up to his disappearance, Andrew didn't stray too far from his usual routine. However, he did skip taking the bus home from school a couple of days, instead choosing to make the 4-mile trek on foot. On the day he actually vanished, Andrew woke up for school later than usual and appeared irritable, according to his mother. Instead of going to his normal bus stop, he took a diversion to a nearby ATM, withdrew a £200 and returned home, where he would be alone. Back at his house, Andrew changed into casual clothing, including a t-shirt representing the band Slipknot, and packed a bag full of other graphic t-shirts for his favorite bands, his wallet, keys, and a video game console. He did leave behind warm outerwear, his console charger, and an additional £100 in cash he had acquired over the last year, signaling that he didn't plan to be out for an extended period of time. CCTV then captured Andrew walking to the railway station at Doncaster and purchasing a one-way ticket to London, denying the option to buy a round-trip fare. At 9:35 a.m., Andrew boarded the train to King's Cross Station in London. The trip took about 2 hours, and he spent most of the time playing video games and keeping to himself. At 11:25 a.m., CCTV captured Andrew one final time leaving King's Cross Station through the main entrance doors, and that would be the final confirmed sighting of Andrew Galston. It is thought by investigators that Andrew was headed to London to watch a gig or two, explaining his wardrobe change, the money withdrawal, and the t-shirts in his possession. His parents have said that he knew a few people in London, including his grandmother, and probably intended to stay with one of them during his excursion, explaining the one-way tickets. But unfortunately, he ran into trouble before he can make that a reality. While Andrew and Alex have no connections prior to their disappearance, it is not out of the question they could have met comparative fates. Andrew was 14 and stood around 5 foot 3 inches when he disappears. Alex was 16, standing around 5 foot 5. Both boys wore glasses, were taking accounting classes, and were known to be maths experts. They were both slightly on the introverted side, but neither one displayed signs or symptoms they were running away for good, much less having a reason to do so in the first place. The boys' cases also both involve shoddy work by the respective investigators. We know the shortcomings of the Alex Slowly case, but the Gosden family experienced similar results. The authorities spent a lot of their time early on sleuthing around the Goldsons' house and investigating the family rather than trying to track down CCTV footage. They never even viewed the CCTV tapes in a few places adjacent to King's Cross in the days after Andrew was reported missing, possibly losing out on news sightings or even tracking where he ended up after deboarding the train. Sadly, the similarities stopped there. Many people are quick to point out that the boys are of a different race, featured different eye and hair colors, and were interested in different things. They also mentioned Alex's location compared to Andrew's. Alex's route home from Edmonton to Islington never brings him far south enough to reach King's Cross. Had he been around King's Cross, he would have passed by the Thane Villas and continued towards central London. There is no reason to believe Alex took such a journey. However, again, it cannot be completely ruled out. There is one glimmer of hope police have in Andrew Gaston's case, however, and it came in December of 2021 when 2 men aged 3,845 were arrested in South Yorkshire by detectives actively working on Andrew's investigation on suspicion of kidnapping and human trafficking along with possession of child pornography. The South Yorkshire police have since said that digital forensics of the men's computers and other assets could take 6 months to a year to complete. So it may be a while before there is any confirmation they actually have some connection to Andrew's case. If they do and they find that Andrew was an unfortunate victim of human trafficking, we hope that they use this lead to dive deeper into the possibility it happened to Alex too. If Mick Neville was right when he postured that the 2 teenage boys were kidnapped by the same serial kidnapper, then this could be the big break in the case that brings light to both Andrew and Alex's fate. And if they aren't connected, then at least the avenue was explored. Because especially in Alex's case, he simply hasn't garnered the attention others have received despite presenting a situation just as tragic and perplexing as all the rest. The case of Alexander Slowly is as confusing as any case we've ever come across. Most of that is due to the complete lack of viable information available to the public for better or for worse. The official investigators can say it's to protect their work and the minimal leads they've collected. But as far as we know, there are no true leads. And what we have to work with as a public is so much less than what other cases provide us. Thus, with the little facts we do have, we feel the most plausible scenario is that Alex was taken against his will by someone or even a group targeting young teenage boys who were by themselves and small enough to not put up a fight. That being said, we believe the only way Alex was kidnapped was if he was forced. He was an incredibly gifted mind and an analytical thinker. He likely would have been wise enough to avoid the tricks of a manipulative perpetrator or at least avoid situations that would have put him into harm's way. It is not out of the realm of possibility Alex was enticed into a car or van by someone offering him a ride home, but it would go against the grain of Alex's past actions and protective, thoughtful demeanor. Was Alex taken by the same people who potentially took Andrew Godson? Probably not. Were there more victims like Alex and Andrew who met a similar fate who haven't yet entered the discussion? Most likely? Is there someone out there who knows more than they're letting on? Absolutely. That does not completely dismiss the possibility that Alex left on his own, either to start a new life or to find a secluded place to end the one he was living. There aren't many clear signs pointing to this conclusion, but sometimes there doesn't need to be. Not everyone who chooses to end their life makes it known beforehand. Regardless, it's our mission to bring Alex's story into the light, amplifying whatever chances remain of bringing him home. If nothing else, may his fate be uncovered and closure be brought to his mother and sisters, who continue to pray for his return and the reunion of their family. Sadly, Alex's father, Christopher, passed away in 2014 without ever knowing what happened to his son. Alex was one of the brightest students in his class, a promising accountant in the making, destined to leave a positive mark on the world. adding to all the other positive impacts he had already made. He was a guide and a source of wisdom for his sisters, a shoulder to lean on when there was no one else around. He was full of life in the company of friends and poured unwavering passion into everything he loved. Though Alex slowly may be without a known location, he is certainly not without his energetic personality, his boundless compassion, and a soul meant for great things. It's up to us to ensure those great things don't disappear into the dark forever. One day, they may come back into focus, and the world will once again see Alex slowly, alive and well, no longer a mystery but perhaps a miracle.